Tomorrow, during fourth period, I'm going to live stream my final moments. That's what Elena, the girl I secretly loved for years, told me after chemistry class. My hands shook as I dialed 911, praying I wasn't too late. 4 years later, on graduation day, I opened my locker and found a note from her. It read, "You took my choice away. Now I'm going to strip everything from you, piece by piece, until you know what it feels like to lose control." I was only 16 when Elena first pulled me aside after chemistry. We'd been close since 7th grade, and my heart had been hers from the start. "I need you to promise me something," she whispered, her eyes sliding away from mine. For a moment, I thought she was finally going to ask me to the dance. I'd been working up the nerve for weeks, but her voice carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I said, "Anything." That's when she told me about Thursday, how she'd been planning it for months. The teachers who'd brushed her off, the parents who only cared about grades. She'd taken her mom's gun from a locked drawer. The next day, she was going to end her life for everyone to see. She had it all mapped out. A live stream during fourth period when Miss Harper would be teaching, when Mr. Donovan would be in the lounge, when all the people who had failed her would have no choice but to watch. She wanted them to carry that memory forever. "But not you," she said, squeezing my hand. "Don't watch. You're the only one who ever really saw me." I just stood there, frozen, her fingers laced with mine, something I'd wanted for months, but not like this. Never like this. "Elena, you can't," I whispered. "It's the only way they'll learn, the only way anything changes." That night I didn't sleep. I kept scrolling through her Instagram, staring at pictures where her smile looked hollow. Had I missed the signs? How she stopped eating lunch, the long sleeves in warm weather, the dark, haunting poems she posted. I thought about Miss Harper, tough but exhausted, raising 3 kids. Mr. Donovan, new and still trying his best. And all the students who'd have to see it happen live, the way that trauma would ripple through our school like a stone dropped into still water. But Elena trusted me. She held my hand. She'd chosen me to confide in. Wasn't that supposed to mean something? By 1 a.m., I was still typing and deleting messages to her. What if I was wrong? What if she never forgave me? What if I lost the only girl who ever made me feel like I mattered? Then I pictured the alternative. Her desk empty in chemistry, her parents grieving at a funeral instead of clapping at graduation. A video the world could never unsee. All because I stayed silent. At 6 a.m., I called the crisis hotline. They patched me through to police. My voice cracked as I told them everything. The officer's tone shifted sharp and urgent, pressing me for details I wish I didn't know. Her full name, her address, the time she'd planned. "You're saving her life," the officer said, but it felt like I was ending it. They reached her at 8 a.m. just as she was setting up her phone in her bedroom. The pills were already lined up, the note already written. The news called it a mental health crisis intervention. Our principal gave interviews about more resources, new counselors, real change. They never said our names, but Elena knew. She disappeared from school for 3 months. When she came back, she refused to look at me. She never answered my texts. Her new friends formed a wall around her in the hall. I heard the whispers, that I betrayed her, that I broke her trust, that I only did it because I couldn't handle rejection. The school did change. They hired more counselors, started peer support groups, trained teachers to recognize the signs. Everyone said I'd done the right thing, but I felt like I had lost everything. 4 years later, on graduation day, I opened my locker and saw her handwriting. The note inside made my stomach twist. "You took my choice away. You made me live when I wanted to die. Now I'm going to strip everything from you, piece by piece, until you know what it feels like to lose control. This isn't over. E." My hands trembled as I shoved it into my pocket. The ceremony was starting in 15 minutes. My parents were already in the auditorium. My cap and gown hung in the locker, waiting. But all I could think about was Elena, somewhere in the building, planning something. I tore through the halls, checking classrooms, bathrooms, nothing. The school is strangely empty with most people already seated inside. My footsteps echoed as my heart pounded louder with every door I opened. Then I saw her. She stood at the end of the main hallway in her graduation gown, her back to me. When she turned, her face was cold, calculated. She held up her phone and hit record. I froze. She walked towards me slowly, keeping the camera pointed at my face. When she was close enough that I caught her vanilla perfume, the same one from 3 years ago, she spoke loud enough for the recording. "Why are you following me? I told you to leave me alone." I opened my mouth, but she stepped closer, whispering so only I could hear. "One word and I'll scream. Who do you think they'll believe? The girl who nearly ended her life because of bullying, or the boy who betrayed her?" Then she stepped back, raising her voice again for the camera. "Please, just go away. I don't want any trouble." And she walked off, leaving me rooted in place. I understood then. This was her plan. She was building a story, piece by piece. But a story of what? I sat through graduation, but my mind wasn't there. Every time I scanned the crowd, her eyes locked onto mine. She sat 4 rows ahead, smiling with her family, the perfect picture of recovery. When they called her name, she got a standing ovation, the girl who overcame everything, the survivor. When they called mine, the applause was muted, almost cautious. I saw the stares. People still remembered the rumors. The boy who called the cops on a broken girl. The betrayer. That's what I felt like everyone was seeing me as. After the ceremony, my parents wanted pictures. We posed by the school sign, smiling for the camera, but every single shot had Elena in the background. She was always there, always watching, always holding up her phone to record. My mom noticed my distracted glances. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked. I forced a smile and nodded. What could I possibly tell her? That the girl whose life I had once saved was now stalking me? That she'd threatened me? They'd think I was paranoid, or worse, that I was the one harassing her. The next few days blurred together in a haze of graduation parties and college prep. I tried pushing Elena from my mind, convincing myself her threat was empty. Maybe she just needed to vent her anger. Maybe it would blow over. But then the posts started. At first, they were subtle. A photo popped up on Instagram from someone's graduation party. In the background, barely noticeable, I was caught glancing in Elena's direction. The caption read, "Great party, though some people can't take a hint." Then came a TikTok, security footage from the school hallway, me walking behind Elena. The video had been edited, cutting out the part where she had stopped to wait for me. All it showed was me following her. The comments were brutal. Creepy behavior. This is why she tried to, some guys just can't handle rejection. I reported it, but more videos appeared. Each clip carefully trimmed and twisted, everyone portraying me as some obsessed stalker who couldn't let her go. My Instagram inbox flooded with strangers calling me disgusting names. My Facebook filled with friend requests from fake accounts. I reached out to mutual friends desperate to explain, but she had already gotten to them first. She showed them her version of the videos, told them I was following her, that she was afraid. They believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was the victim. Meanwhile, my parents started noticing changes in me. I was jumpy, glued to my phone, barely sleeping. They asked what was wrong, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain that saving someone's life had turned into my own personal nightmare? 2 weeks after graduation, I was at the grocery store when I felt someone's eyes on me. I turned, and there she was, Elena at the end of the aisle, phone aimed at me. She smiled, waved, then typed something into her phone. Seconds later, my screen lit up. A photo of me in the cereal aisle. Caption, "Can't even shop without him showing up. This is getting scary." I left my cart and bolted. By the time I got home, the post had already spread through our town's Facebook group. Comments poured in, people saying the police should be called, that someone needed to protect her, that something had to be done about that boy. When I walked into the kitchen, my mom was waiting. Her face was pale, her laptop open. "We need to talk," she said. She'd seen the posts, the videos, the comments. She wanted to know what was really happening. I tried to explain, but even to me it sounded insane. A conspiracy? Edited videos? Staged encounters? My mom wanted to believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But doubt was there too. Why would Elena do this? What could she possibly gain? I showed her the note from graduation, but she pointed out it wasn't signed. This could be from anyone. That night, I lay in bed, phone in hand, watching my reputation collapse in real time. Friends unfriended me. People I'd met at college blocked me. In just a few days, the title of the boy who saved a life was gone, replaced by something much darker. Then I spotted something. In one video, a reflection in a window, another person holding a phone. Someone else was helping her.
I took a screenshot and zoomed in. The face was blurry, but I knew it. Adrian Royval, one of her newer friends. The one who had been the loudest about protecting me from her. I finally had a piece of real evidence, but what could I do with it? Who would believe me? Her words from the note echoed in my head, piece by piece. My reputation was already destroyed. What would be next? My phone buzzed, an unknown number. This is just the beginning. Sweet dreams. Attached was a photo of my house, taken from across the street. I jumped up and rushed to the window. The street was empty, but I knew she was out there, watching, planning. I stormed into my parents' bedroom and shook my dad awake. He groaned, checked the clock, then saw my face and immediately sat up. I shoved my phone into his hands, explaining everything in a rush. He grabbed a flashlight and went outside, while Mom called the police. The officers showed up within 16 minutes. They listened, took my statement, studied the photo, and searched the area. Nothing. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there. One officer suggested the picture could have been taken earlier in the day with a timer. The other asked if I'd been in conflict with anyone recently. I told them about Elena, showed them the posts and the videos. They wrote things down, but I saw the doubt in their eyes. One officer pulled my parents aside. I couldn't hear what was said, but I caught Mom's anxious looks in my direction. After they left, my parents sat me down. Dad suggested I talk to a therapist. Mom said stress from graduation and college can make people see things differently. They didn't say they didn't believe me, but they didn't say they did either. I stayed up the rest of the night refreshing social media obsessively. More posts appeared. Photos from different angles at the grocery store, angles I hadn't even noticed. Videos from graduation showing me staring at her. Each one perfectly crafted to tell the same story. The story of an obsessed boy who just couldn't let her go. By morning, I had 19 missed calls from friends, but none of them were to check on me. Every single one was a warning. Leave Elena alone, get help, stop whatever I was doing. My best friend since middle school sent a long text saying he was disappointed in me, that he never thought I'd turn into that kind of guy. I decided I wasn't going down without a fight. I opened my laptop and created a document, lining up timestamps to show how the videos had been edited. I pointed out inconsistencies, things that didn't add up. Then I wrote a long post explaining my side, how I'd saved Elena's life, the note she left me, everything. Within an hour, the post was gone, reported for harassment. My account got suspended for violating community guidelines. Meanwhile, her posts stayed up, pulling in more views and more angry comments about me. College orientation was just 5 days away. I'd been looking forward to it for months, thinking it would be a clean slate. New people, new town, 3 hours away from all this. Now I wondered if her story would follow me there too. That afternoon, I drove to the mall to grab supplies for my dorm. I kept my head down, hoping nobody recognized me. I was loading bags into my trunk when a familiar voice cut through the parking lot. Adrian Vegas stood behind me, flanked by 2 other guys from school. They didn't say a word, didn't make threats. They just stood there, staring at me. Adrian held up his phone, not recording, just showing me the screen. It was a group chat. Over 50 members. The name, Shielding E. He scrolled through the messages. People were sharing my whereabouts, talking about spotting me around town, planning ways to step in if I got too close to Elena. Some of the names were people I'd never even met, strangers who had joined after watching the viral videos. Adrian tucked his phone away, and the three of them walked off in silence. The message was clear enough. I wasn't just being watched by Elena anymore. I was being tracked by an entire network of people who thought I was dangerous. I drove home in a daze. This wasn't about her and me anymore. She had turned it into something bigger. She wasn't just a girl telling her story. She had built a movement, a symbol of survival. And me? I had become the symbol of every guy who couldn't handle rejection. The truth didn't matter anymore. The narrative had grown legs of its own. That evening, Mom knocked on my door. She'd been crying. Someone had messaged her workplace, warning that her son was dangerous. Her boss called her in, told her he wasn't taking action yet, but suggested she might want to take time off until things cooled down. Dad was in the living room, his laptop open, his expression grim. He showed me what he'd found, a website, a whole page dedicated to exposing me. Every video, every photo, all in one place. Fake screenshots of conversations where I supposedly said sick things. They looked real, even though I knew they weren't. At the bottom of the page was a counter. Days since last incident, 1. It reset every time someone reported seeing me near her, even if it was just me existing in the same town. My parents tried to be supportive, but the strain was obvious. Mom kept asking if there was something I wasn't telling them. Dad brought up maybe postponing college for a semester, letting things die down. Hearing the doubt in their voices cut deeper than all the online hate. That night, I made up my mind. I needed proof, real proof. I started digging into Adrian Vega. I pulled up his social media, scrolled back through his history. 4 months ago, right around the time Elena came back to school, his posts shifted. Suddenly he was all about mental health awareness, suicide prevention, protecting survivors. And whenever he posted about Elena, there was something calculated about it. A hashtag, a phrase, a tone that felt coordinated. I dug deeper, tracing connections between Adrian Vega and the other people most active in smearing me online. They all seemed to have gotten close to Elena around the same time. They all used similar words. It was too neat to be random. Then I found something strange. A photo from a party 3 weeks before graduation. In the background, just barely visible, was Yelena's laptop. On the screen, a document titled Operation Renewal. I zoomed in as far as I could. The text was fuzzy, but I could make out headings, phases, timelines, goals. It wasn't much, but it was something. I saved it, building my own folder of evidence. But I knew screenshots weren't enough. I needed someone on the inside, someone who could confirm it. That's when I thought of Chloe. We'd all had chemistry together. She'd been friends with Elena once, before everything fell apart. She was one of the few who hadn't immediately taken sides after the intervention. Maybe she'd hear me out. I found her working at the downtown bookstore. When she saw me, her expression tightened, but she didn't run or call anyone. I approached slowly, hands visible, keeping space between us. I asked if we could talk. She hesitated, looked around the empty store, then motioned me toward a corner table. We sat down. She stayed tense, like she was ready to bolt. I laid everything out, calmly. The note, the videos, the coordination. She listened, silent, then sat back, thinking. When she finally spoke, her words made my stomach drop. Elena had approached her months ago, pitching something she called her resilience plan. She described it as a way to reclaim control, to prove survivors could be powerful. But the way she talked about justice, about teaching people lessons, about consequences, it had scared her off. She turned it down. After that, Elena cut her off completely. Now watching everything play out online, Chloe said she wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of what Elena was capable of. She agreed to help carefully. She still had access to a few group chats, could see some of the planning. She warned me, Elena was careful. Everything was designed to look natural, spontaneous. The people helping her genuinely believed they were defending a victim. Over the next few days, Chloe slipped me information. Elena had phases planned out. Step 1 was isolation, cutting me off from every support system I had. Next came escalation, painting me as more and more dangerous. The final stage was called resolution, though she admitted she didn't know exactly what that meant. By then, I was living in constant fear. Every time I stepped outside, someone was there with a camera. Every move I made was twisted online. My parents were drowning in pressure from the community, while old friends started cutting ties. Even my future was at risk. My college had already called about concerns they'd received. Then, finally, Elena slipped up. I was at the gas station when she showed up again, phone in hand like always, but this time, instead of just filming, she came close, pretending to text, and spoke under her breath. She told me there was a way to make everything stop. All I had to do was admit publicly that I'd only saved her life out of obsession, that I'd violated her autonomy, that I'd been selfish. What she didn't know was that I had been recording the entire conversation from my pocket. The audio wasn't perfect, but her voice was there, her words were clear enough. For the first time, I had something solid. But when I tried to use it, it backfired. The sound was too muffled, too easy to dismiss as fake. Elena spun it immediately, claiming I had doctored the audio, that it was proof of how desperate and unstable I'd become. The harassment only got worse. My mom was placed on leave from work after messages were sent to her boss about having a dangerous son. My dad's clients started calling with questions, worried about being associated with him. One night, they sat me down. Dad suggested maybe I should stay with my aunt out of state, just until things cooled down. I knew that's what Elena wanted, to drive me away, to make me run. But watching my family suffer was unbearable. I told them I'd think about it. That same night, Chloe sent me an urgent message. She had found something about Phase 4. It was scheduled for next week, right before I was supposed to leave for college. She didn't have every detail, but it was supposed to be a final confrontation, something staged to lock in the narrative forever. I barely slept. My mind raced all night. Elena had built the perfect trap. If I pushed back, I looked guilty. If I left town, I looked guilty. If I did nothing, she would keep tightening the noose until something snapped. My family was cracking, my future slipping away. But then I remembered. Security cameras. The same ones at school that had been used against me. The footage that got chopped up to make me look like a stalker. The raw footage would tell the real story. They'd show her waiting, planning, baiting me. Getting access was the problem. The school was locked down for summer. I couldn't just walk in and ask for it. But then I thought of Mr. Donovan, the teacher Elena had once planned to traumatize with her live stream. He was still at the school, running summer classes. I emailed him, carefully laying out my situation. Honestly, I didn't expect to hear back. The next morning, he replied. He wanted to meet. We sat down at a coffee shop in the next town over. He looked older, worn down. He told me he'd been watching what was happening online, and something about it never sat right with him. He had topped both Elena and me. He knew our characters. He couldn't hand me the security footage himself, but he could request it under the banner of school safety reviews. It would take time, but it was a start. Then he told me something that stuck. Not long after she returned to school, Elena had written an essay for his class. On the surface, it was about reclaiming power after trauma. He admitted her writing was strong, but what disturbed him was the subtext, her fixation on balance, on justice, on making sure those who hurt you felt pain in return. He still had a copy, locked away in case it ever became relevant. I left that meeting with the first real sense of hope I'd had in weeks. But Chloe's warnings about Phase 4 kept echoing in my head. Time was running out. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I documented everything I could. Chloe funneled me more information, and slowly, my parents, despite their doubts, started to see it too. The coordination, the precision, the way everything escalated exactly on cue. Then Chloe got the final piece. Phase 3 meant staging an attack. Elena wanted to engineer a confrontation that would make me look like I'd finally snapped.
She had people lined up, ready to film, ready to testify. She knew my routines, my habits. It would be the proof she needed. But now, for once, I had an edge. Knowing her plan gave me the chance to flip it. I could avoid the spot she'd chosen, I could plant my own witnesses, I could finally turn her trap back on her. The day came quicker than I expected. According to Chloe, I was supposed to be at the bank that morning, something she had learned through her network. Instead of me, I sent Dad to run the errand while I stayed home. Later, he told me he saw her there, standing with several people spaced around the lobby, all of them ready with their phones. When I didn't show, I could only imagine her fury. Weeks of planning gone in an instant. But I also knew she wouldn't stop. She'd pivot, find another way. And that afternoon, she did something reckless. She came to my house. I was upstairs in my room when the doorbell rang. My mom answered, and I froze when I heard that voice. Elena. Sweet, concerned, asking if I was home, saying she was worried about me, that she wanted to talk, to clear the air. My mom, still clinging to the hope of peace, invited her in. I stayed on the stairs listening as they sat in the living room. I heard her spin her story, misunderstandings, healing, wanting to move forward. Then my mom called up to me. Come down, she wants to talk. And in that moment, I knew this was it. Another trap. But I also knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and walked downstairs. Elena sat calmly on the couch, small and fragile, playing the perfect victim. When she spotted me, her eyes went wide, full of practiced fear, but I caught the flicker of a smirk before she buried it. She began speaking softly about forgiveness, about moving past everything, about healing. Then she rose to her feet and started closing the distance between us. I didn't move. I held my ground, making sure the camera caught it all. That's when she made her move. She gasped suddenly, staggered back, and crashed into a lamp. The glass shattered across the floor as she screamed, "I tried to grab her!" But my mom had been watching. She saw the truth. I hadn't budged an inch. For the first time, Elena's mask slipped. She looked from me to my mom, realizing her performance had failed. She tried to recover, stammering about being startled, about being jumpy around me, but it was too late. My mom's voice was firm when she asked her to leave. She gathered her things, but before stepping out, she leaned in close. Her whisper was venom. This isn't over. I'll make sure the world knows what kind of person you really are. But this time, her threat felt hollow. She had overplayed her hand. After she left, my mom sat there in silence, shocked. For the first time since this nightmare began, she truly believed me. She had seen the act with her own eyes. We called my dad home from work. Together, we went through all the evidence I'd collected. Piece by piece, the pattern emerged. The coordination, the escalation, the staged traps. My parents weren't angry with me anymore. They were furious at her and at themselves for ever doubting me. Still, we needed something solid, something undeniable, because her network was still out there spinning lies. Then Mr. Donovan called. He had filed the request for security footage through official channels and now had access. He couldn't give it to me directly, but he had reviewed it. What he saw alarmed him enough that he felt obligated to escalate it to the school administration, urging them to bring in law enforcement. The unedited recordings showed everything. Elena waiting, adjusting her phone, placing herself in position before approaching me. The narrative she'd built began to crack. The administration, terrified of liability, launched their own investigation. More footage came to light, more evidence surfaced. Some of her friends, when officially questioned, admitted she had asked them to film certain encounters, to post carefully worded comments. The house of cards was tumbling down. Then Chloe handed me the final blow. Screenshots from their planning chats.
There it was in black and white, Elena laying out her goals, her phases, her intent to ruin me as revenge for saving her. The messages were undeniable, cold, malicious. And yet, even as the truth unraveled, I felt no victory. Elena wasn't just cruel, she was hurting. Her trauma had twisted into vengeance. The pain she carried had found a target, and that target was me. Online, the tide shifted. Some who had condemned me started to question. A few apologized. Others just vanished, deleting their old comments. The website dedicated to destroying me went offline. My parents' jobs stabilized. Old friends reached out again, awkward and hesitant. Even the college called to say they were no longer concerned. But the scars remained. My reputation was wrecked. My family had been dragged through hell. My ability to trust anyone felt shattered. And despite everything, she still had defenders. People convinced I had manipulated the evidence, that the system had failed her again. I thought about the girl I had once tried to save. The one who whispered secrets after chemistry class, her hand warm in mine. I had wanted to be her hero, but in her story, I had become the villain. As I packed for college, trying to piece together what was left of my future, I got one last message. It wasn't a threat. It was almost an apology. The anonymous text said Elena had been hospitalized, finally getting real treatment. She admitted she understood her actions were wrong, but she still couldn't forgive me for saving her. That choice had taken everything from her, and revenge was the only control she'd felt since. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. There was nothing left to say. My parents drove me to college on a gray August morning. We didn't talk much, just quiet exhaustion, the weight of everything we had endured. But we were together. We had survived. As I unloaded my bags, I looked around. Families hugging their kids, proud, nervous, excited for the future. Normal families with normal problems. I envied them. My roommate seemed easygoing. He didn't recognize my name, didn't know the story. For the first time in years, I had a chance at a fresh start.
But I knew the internet never forgets. Someday, someone would connect the dots. The story would catch up to me. That night, in the silence of my dorm room, I thought about choices. The one I made to save her, the one she made to destroy me. Choices we would both carry forever. I had saved her life, but in the process I had taken something from her, and she had nearly taken everything from me. Neither of us had really won. Both of us had lost something that couldn't be replaced. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom checking in. Then Chloe wishing me luck. Even Mr. Donovan with a short email hoping I was settling in well. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, I could start again. These were the people who had stuck with me when everything else fell apart. That had to mean something. I looked around my small dorm room, at the bare walls waiting for new memories, new pieces of a life I was trying to rebuild. This wasn't the college experience I had imagined for myself, but it was mine now. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my roommate's alarm. He groaned, threw a pillow at it, then asked if I wanted to grab breakfast. I said yes. It was a small, ordinary thing, but after months where nothing felt normal, it felt like a victory. Classes started. I threw myself into them, grateful for the distraction. Psychology, ironically, became my favorite subject. Learning about why people act the way they do, how trauma shapes behavior, how pain can turn into something destructive, I understood it in a way I hadn't before. Weeks passed. The story didn't catch up to me as quickly as I feared. When it finally did surface, the reactions in my dorm surprised me. Some people were curious, some sympathetic. A few avoided me, but most seemed to realize that there were two sides to every story. I even made real friends. People who knew about my past and chose to stand beside me anyway. We didn't talk about it much, but when we did, they listened without judgment. One night while studying in the library, I came across an article about Elena. She was speaking at a mental health awareness event, sharing her story of survival. The article mentioned the boy who had called for help, who had saved her life. It didn't name me. The tone was neutral, almost clinical. She was finding her way forward, healing in her own way. I closed the article and went back to my work. We were both moving on, separately, with our scars and our stories. The girl with the pretty eyes who once wanted to die. The boy who made the call that changed everything. Two kids defined by choices that would haunt us both. My phone buzzed, a text from my study group, asking if I was coming. I packed up my things and headed out into the night, toward voices and laughter, toward the kind of ordinary college drama I had craved. The truth was, I'd do it again. Even knowing the cost, I'd still make that call, because Elena was alive. Troubled, angry, scarred, but alive. She had a chance to heal, to grow, to become whoever she was meant to be. And that had to matter for something. As I crossed campus, I thought about next chances. Elena had gotten hers, even if she didn't want it. Now I was getting mine, trying to build a life beyond what had happened. We'd probably never speak again. The hurt was too deep, the damage too raw. But somewhere out there, she was living the life I'd helped give her back to herself. And I was living mine. It wasn't the ending either of us had planned, but it was one we could both live with. The illusion of a clean slate shattered during my next month of college. I was walking back from a psychology lecture when I froze. Across the quad, near the student union, stood Adrian Vega. He was talking to someone from my dorm. My stomach dropped. Adrian had no reason to be here. The college was 2 hours from home. His presence wasn't a coincidence. I ducked into the library and watched through the glass. He showed the student something on his phone. The student nodded, then pointed toward my dorm. That evening, my roommate acted strangely. He kept glancing at me while pretending to study, his phone buzzing nonstop. When I asked if he was okay, he muttered something about being tired and disappeared into the common room. Over the next few days, things shifted. Conversations stopped when I walked into a room. People who had been friendly suddenly found excuses to leave. The study group stopped inviting me. My new friends became distant. The pattern was unmistakable. The isolation phase. Again. But how? Elena was supposed to be in treatment, recovering. Unless she wasn't. Chloe confirmed it one night with a hurried text. She had seen chatter in the old group chats. Elena had been discharged weeks ago. She had convinced the doctors she was better, that she understood her mistakes. But through mutual friends, Chloe learned the truth. Elena was already planning something new. She called it her final project. I started documenting again. The stares, the whispers, the phones held just a little longer when I passed by. But this time I wasn't going to wait for it to boil over. I needed to move before she escalated. In psychology class, we were assigned a paper on trauma responses in recovery. As I researched, I began to see Elena's behavior through a clearer lens. The obsession with control, the inability to let go, the way trauma can twist into aggression against the very person who takes away your agency. It didn't excuse her, but it made the pattern clearer. Then I stumbled across an Instagram account, Expose the Danger. It had been created 3 weeks earlier, right when Elena was discharged. The posts were careful, no names, but the details were impossible to mistake. Stories about a male student with a history of stalking vulnerable women, blurry photos of a dorm building that looked a lot like mine, grainy shots from angles that suggested someone had been following me across campus. The account grew quickly. My school had a strong culture of protecting survivors, and the posts were crafted to tap right into that mindset. Soon, I noticed new faces watching me in the dining hall, following me between classes. I reported the account, but every time it was taken down, another one popped up, sharper, more believable. Elena had learned from her mistakes. She wasn't directly tied to anything this time. She was letting others do the work, shaping a movement that looked organic.
my grades began to slip. How could I focus on calculus when I knew people were snapping photos of me in lecture? How could I write papers when I wondered if my laptop was being watched? The paranoia was crushing, exactly what she wanted. One night, my roommate finally broke. He turned his phone toward me, showing the messages he'd been getting, anonymous accounts warning me about living with a dangerous person. Links to articles about campus safety, stories polished just enough to feel credible, to plant doubt in anyone reading them. My roommate had already asked for a room change, for his own safety. That night, I didn't go back to my dorm. I stayed in the library instead, too uneasy to sleep anywhere else. That's where I met Daniel. He was a junior, working the late shift at the help desk. He'd noticed I had been hanging around the library every night that week and finally asked if I was okay. Something about the way he asked, genuine, no judgment, broke through my walls. I didn't spill everything, but I told him enough. Someone from my past was trying to destroy my reputation, and I felt trapped and alone. Daniel listened quietly. Then he told me about his own first year, when an ex spread lies about him online. He explained how he had learned to document everything, build a support system, and refuse to let someone else's pain ruin his future. He introduced me to a handful of other students who'd been through similar storms. It wasn't a formal group, just people who understood what it was like to be targeted. They showed me practical things, how to sweep for hidden cameras, how to lock down social media, how to spot manipulation tactics before they hit. But Elena was moving faster than I could adapt. The Instagram accounts grew sharper, crueler. They began dropping details only someone from our high school would know, twisted just enough to sound sinister. My name wasn't mentioned, but anyone who knew me could put the pieces together. Campus security called me in for a meeting. They'd received multiple complaints about my behavior. Nothing concrete, nothing actionable, but enough to put a file in my name. They handed me pamphlets about appropriate conduct, suggested counseling. The look in the officer's eyes said it all. He believed where there was smoke, there had to be fire. I felt myself losing again. But this time, I wasn't alone. Daniel and his friends helped me track everything. We traced IP addresses from the anonymous accounts, spotted patterns in when posts went up, even found stock images being used to build fake profiles of supposed victims. Then Chloe sent me another urgent message. She had overheard something chilling. Elena wasn't just lurking online anymore. She was coming here. Not for a visit, to stay. She'd convinced her parents that being near me would help her heal, that facing her trauma head-on was necessary for recovery. They'd even helped her get an apartment off campus. That meant one thing. The next phase was starting. And this time it would be worse. On campus, she'd know my schedule, my habits, my safe spaces. She could stage random incomings that weren't random at all. She could build her narrative in real time.
I thought about leaving, transferring, starting over somewhere else. But running would make her lies look true, and there was no guarantee she wouldn't follow me again. This had to end here. Daniel and I made a plan. We mapped out the campus, marked cameras and blind spots. We set up a buddy system so I was never alone in risky spots. Mr. Donovan even wrote a statement about what he had seen years ago, though we knew it wouldn't carry much weight on this campus. The day Elena arrived, I felt it before I saw her. The air shifted. Students who had started doubting the rumors suddenly had fresh conviction. New witnesses came forward. Stories multiplied overnight. I spotted her outside the psychology building. She looked healthier, more confident, chatting animatedly with a group of students. When her eyes found me, she didn't react. She just kept talking like I wasn't there. But I knew the act. She was planting herself in the community, weaving her net, one relationship at a time. Every interaction was a chess move. The encounters began small. She'd show up at the coffee shop right after I arrived, forcing me to either leave or sit there under her gaze.
She started sitting in the back of my psychology lectures, even though she wasn't enrolled. She was everywhere, yet always untouchable. Then she started targeting my allies. Daniel received anonymous threats. Others had their accounts hacked, private photos leaked. The message was clear: stand with me and pay the price. Some friends drifted away. I couldn't blame them. But Daniel refused to bend. He said, "I've dealt with bullies before, not letting another one win." The breakthrough came from a place I didn't expect. My psychology professor pulled me aside after class. She'd noticed Elena sitting in lectures she wasn't signed up for. She'd also been getting strange, anonymous emails about me, emails that read like part of a campaign. As someone who studied human behavior, she recognized the signs of orchestration. She couldn't intervene directly, but she told me to look closely at the school's policies on harassment and stalking. Not to file a complaint yet, it might backfire, but to know my rights. She also mentioned that unauthorized attendance in classes was taken seriously. That sparked an idea. Instead of wasting energy defending myself against rumors, I could document Elena's actual violations. Her crashing classes she wasn't enrolled, slipping into buildings without clearance, photographing me without consent. Actions that weren't just manipulative, but against the rules. So Daniel and I got to work. We logged her appearances, recorded when she sat in my classes, gathered photos of her sneaking into restricted areas, compiled security footage that showed her shadowing me. The file grew thicker by the day. But I knew paperwork alone wouldn't topple her. She needed to slip again, to drop the mask in front of witnesses. The chance came with the announcement of a campus safety workshop. The theme, bystander intervention. I knew without a doubt she wouldn't be able to resist showing up. Sure enough, she showed up, sitting confidently among a group of students she'd pulled into her orbit. When the facilitator asked if anyone had personal experiences with feeling unsafe on campus, I lifted my hand. Calm, steady. I didn't name her, didn't accuse directly. I talked about being followed between classes, about being photographed without consent, about someone slipping into lectures they weren't even enrolled in. I watched as Elena's face tensed. This wasn't part of the script she'd prepared. When the facilitator pressed for details, I gave them dates, times, places. Other students nodded, recognizing the behavior for what it was. Elena couldn't hold back. She interrupted, insisting that sometimes innocent actions get misread as threatening, that maybe the person I was describing had their own reasons for being where they were. Her words were controlled, but the anger bled through. The facilitator didn't miss it. Trained to recognize manipulation, she redirected the conversation, but I noticed she was jotting down notes. Afterwards, she asked to speak with each of us separately. I went first. I showed her the documentation I'd built up with Daniel. Her expression hardened as she went through it all. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was about violations, policy, privacy, safety. When Elena emerged from her meeting, her face was flushed. She'd been told plainly that sitting in classes without enrollment was against policy. Photographing students without permission broke privacy rules, and tailgating into restricted buildings wasn't allowed. She'd have to explain herself or face consequences. But she wasn't done. That night, the anonymous accounts exploded. Fake screenshots of texts I supposedly sent. Doctored photos making me look like a predator. A flood of posts meant to smear me before the administration could act. Then at 1 a.m., my phone rang. It was Daniel. Someone had called the police reporting that I was planning something violent. Multiple anonymous tips had come in. The cops were looking for me. I stayed calm, dialed campus security myself, and told them where I was, sitting in my dorm room. When the officers arrived, I cooperated fully. They quickly saw the reports were bogus, but still, another file, another record, another scar. The next morning, I was done playing defense. I walked straight into the administration building and filed a formal complaint. Not about the rumors, not about the gossip, about the hard evidence. The unauthorized class attendance, the illegal photography, the false police reports. I named her directly. I handed over everything: security footage, witness accounts, logs of her appearances, even Mr. Donovan's statement and Chloe's screenshots from high school. This wasn't he said, she said anymore. The school had no choice. They launched a formal investigation. Elena tried to frame it as retaliation, but the truth was too heavy to ignore. The footage didn't lie. The police reports could be traced. Her own allies cracked when questioned, admitting she'd asked them to track me, to film me, to spread her narrative. The investigation stretched 2 weeks. During that time, she lashed out harder. She staged another confrontation in the dining hall, trying to bait me, but I stayed calm, kept my distance, let her performance unravel in front of hundreds of witnesses. Then she snapped. She grabbed my arm when I tried to leave, screaming that I was running away again, that I couldn't face what I'd done. But this time, dozens of phones caught everything. Me walking away peacefully, her clawing at me, her aggression on full display. Security stepped in. Cameras caught it all. There was no way to spin it now. The administration's decision came a week later. Elena was banned from campus. Any return would count as trespassing. The false police reports were referred to local law enforcement. Students who helped her spread the lies were given official warnings. Still, she tried one last play. She posted a long, emotional message online about being silenced, about institutions protecting predators. Some still clung to her side, but most saw through it. The evidence had spoken too loudly. I thought it was finally over. Then, 6 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not from her, but from her parents. They apologized for not seeing what she was doing, for letting it go so far. They explained she was finally in serious treatment, working with specialists who understood her condition. They thanked me for saving her life, even though she still couldn't see it that way. Inside the envelope was another letter, this one from her. I hesitated before opening it. Her handwriting looked different, less sharp, less controlled. She didn't apologize exactly, but she admitted what she had done. She wrote about therapy, about her need for control, about learning to live with the choice I'd taken from her. She said she was transferring to a school across the country. We'd never cross paths again. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. But I kept the letter anyway. A reminder that even the darkest choices come from pain. The rest of my first year was quiet. The rumors faded, replaced by new campus gossip. Some people still watched me with suspicion, but most moved on. I slipped back into study groups, made new friends, rebuilt the life she had tried to shatter. Daniel became my closest friend. We'd been through a war together, and that kind of thing forged a bond. He introduced me to Vanessa, his girlfriend, who had her own scars from a stalker. Together, the three of us became our own little support system. My grades climbed again. My psychology professor took me under her wing, guiding me through not just what had happened, but why. For my final paper, I wrote about trauma responses, about how victims and aggressors can swap roles in cycles of pain. It was the best work I'd ever done. Chloe kept in touch. She told me she was proud of how I handled everything, how I'd fought back without sinking to cruelty. She was applying to law school, inspired by what she had seen, proof that sometimes the system could work if you used it the right way. Near the end of the year, Mr. Donovan sent me an email. He'd heard pieces of what had gone on at college and wanted me to know he was proud too. He reminded me that saving a life is never wrong, even if the person you save never thanks you for it.
Summer came with its promise of a fresh start. I chose to stay on campus, taking extra classes and working shifts in the library. I needed to reclaim this space for myself, to build memories that weren't poisoned by paranoia. One evening, while studying my usual spot, my phone buzzed. For a split second, my heart jumped, expecting another anonymous threat. But it was just my mom, sending me photos from a family barbecue. Kids running in the yard, my dad at the grill. Life going on. And I realized then, Elena hadn't won. She tried to strip my life away piece by piece, but I'd rebuilt each piece as I went. My family was still with me. I had friends who chose to stay. I was still in college, still working toward my future. The scars were there. I still checked over my shoulder too often. My pulse still spiked when I saw someone who resembled her. But I was healing, slowly, surely, just like she was, somewhere out there. As I packed up my books that night, I thought about the symmetry of it all. 3 years earlier, I'd made a choice that changed both of our lives. I saved her, and she'd spent years trying to ruin me for it. Yet here we both were, still standing, still fighting, still trying to move forward. The campus was quiet on my walk back to the dorm. A few summer students strolled in groups, laughing at something on a phone. The normalcy of it felt like a gift. For the first time in years, I blended in, just another student walking home. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel, asking if I wanted pizza with him and Vanessa. I smiled and typed back, yes. Life was moving forward. One ordinary moment at a time. That's all I'd ever wanted. Not to be a hero, not to be a villain. Just a regular college kid worrying about exams and weekend plans. Elena had tried to rip that away from me, but she hadn't. I was still here. Still me. Still choosing every day to see the good in people despite everything. When I stepped into my dorm, I made a decision. I'd carry the lessons, but I wouldn't carry the weight forever. I'd saved a life once, and I'd paid for it. But along the way, I learned how to save my own, how to fight for the future I deserved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they'd be normal ones. Classes, papers, friends. The kind of problems I used to dream about having back in those dark days when it felt like the whole world was against me. I climbed the stairs to my room, lighter than I'd felt in months. Whatever came next, I was ready. Not because I was special, but because I'd learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed. The door clicked shut behind me. Outside, campus life moved on. Inside, I opened my laptop and dug into summer coursework. Just another student. Just another night. Just another step into the future I was building for myself. It wasn't the ending either of us had imagined 3 years ago, but it was real. And it was mine. And for me, that was enough. That was my story. What do you think about it? Would you have acted the same way or chosen differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And remember, this story is our little secret, so shh.